Luna felt the cold embrace of space wrap around her, as Crimson's powerful wings beat against the vacuum. The dragon had adapted to the airless environment thousands of years ago, drawing oxygen from the very fabric of reality itself, through ancient magical channels woven into his massive body. Ember flew beside them, his silver scales reflecting the distant light of stars that seemed impossibly small and far away. Luna sat firmly on Crimson's neck, her long silver hair streaming behind her like a comet's tail, and she gripped the dragon's warm scales with practiced hands. The bond between them pulsed with warmth and strength. Through her connection with her dragons, Luna could feel everything they felt. She experienced the rush of their joy at being free and flying through the open universe. She felt their hunger and their constant awareness of the dangers that surrounded them in every direction. Most importantly, she felt their complete trust in her to guide them towards safety and shelter. Behind them, the planet Keth was now just a distant sphere of purple and crystal blue against the vast darkness of space. Luna could see the fires still burning on the crystal plateau where the military ship had crashed. She wondered if there were survivors down there, if any of those soldiers had managed to escape the wreckage and were now stranded on an alien world far from home. The thought made her heart heavy, but she pushed the feeling away. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences of her actions. As they flew deeper into space, Luna began to notice something strange. The stars around them seemed to be moving in unusual patterns, and there was a faint humming sound that resonated through the bond she shared with Crimson and Ember. The dragons felt it too. Their movements became more cautious, more deliberate. They were sensing danger in the cosmic currents that flowed around them. Luna tried to identify the source of the disturbance. She closed her eyes and extended her senses outward, drawing on the ancient elf knowledge that had been passed down through countless generations. Her people had once been masters of cosmic navigation, able to read the flows of energy that moved through the universe like invisible rivers. She had learned some of those skills herself during her long life. Though much of the old knowledge had been lost when her civilization fell to ruin, the humming grew louder, and suddenly Luna felt a spike of alarm through her bond with Crimson. The great red and gold dragon banked sharply to the left, and Ember followed immediately. Just moments later, a beam of intense energy blazed through the space where they had been flying. It was a laser blast, powerful and precise, fired from something hidden in the darkness ahead of them. Luna's mind raced. Another ship. Another threat. But this one was different from the military vessel that had pursued them from Keth. The weapon that had just fired at them was more sophisticated, more powerful. Luna could sense the technology behind it, could feel the intelligence and cunning of whoever was controlling it. She leaned forward and whispered urgent commands to Crimson through their bond. The dragon understood immediately. He began to fly in a complex pattern, weaving and dodging through space as more laser blasts cut through the darkness around them. Ember matched his movements perfectly, the two dragons performing an aerial dance that they had perfected over centuries of hunting and training together. Luna counted the blasts as they came. 5, 10, 15. Whoever was attacking them was skilled and determined, but they were also constrained by the limitations of their technology. The dragons, on the other hand, had reflexes and intuition that no machine could match. They could sense the buildup of energy before the laser blasts were fired, could anticipate the trajectory of each beam, could adjust their flight path with millisecond precision. The attackers seemed to realize that a direct confrontation would not end well for them. The laser fire ceased, and instead, a voice crackled through a communication channel that somehow pierced through the vacuum of space and reached Luna's ears. The voice belonged to a female, older and weathered by years of hard life. She spoke in a language that Luna recognized as an ancient form of galactic standard, modified and altered by centuries of isolation and evolution. But Luna could understand it. She understood it perfectly. The woman called herself Captain Mira, and she was the commander of a privateer ship called the Windrunner. She claimed to be a salvage hunter, someone who searched through the debris fields of dead civilizations to find valuable artifacts and technologies. But the things she was saying suggested something else entirely. She claimed to have been tracking Luna's energy signature since she left the planet Keth. She claimed to know about the dragons, and she claimed to want to help. Luna did not trust her. Every instinct she possessed screamed that this was a trap. But she was also curious. How had this Captain Mira known where to find her? How had she tracked their flight through space? And most importantly, what did she want? Luna activated a return communication signal, her voice cool and measured as she responded to the captain. She asked simple questions. Who was Mira? What did she want? Why was she attacking them? The response came back quickly. Captain Mira explained that she had not been attacking Luna, but rather shooting at the tracking devices that the military government had attached to Luna's energy signature. She claimed that she had been monitoring Luna's escape from Keth and had raced through space to intercept her before the military forces could catch up. She claimed that she was trying to save Luna's life. It sounded like a story. It sounded like the kind of tale that someone would tell to gain trust before betraying that trust completely. But as Luna extended her senses further, as she drew on the ancient knowledge of her people to read the truth in the cosmic energies around her, she began to sense something else. There was a genuine fear in Captain Mira's voice. There was urgency and desperation underlying every word. Whatever Mira wanted, she did not seem to be lying about wanting to help. Luna made a decision. She guided Crimson and Ember toward the source of the voice, moving through the darkness of space with careful, deliberate movements. The privateer ship called the Windrunner slowly revealed itself, materializing out of the shadows as Luna and her dragons approached. It was a small vessel, much smaller than the military ship that had attacked them on Keth, but it was heavily armed and appeared to be well maintained. A docking bay opened on the side of the ship, and Luna felt Captain Mira's voice call out through the communication channel, inviting her to come inside. Luna hesitated for just a moment. She knew that entering the ship would put her in a vulnerable position. She would be trapped inside a metal vessel with no escape route except the way she had come. But she also knew that she could not fly through space forever. She needed information, shelter, and supplies. And right now, Captain Mira was the only being in this part of the galaxy who seemed willing to help her. Luna guided Crimson toward the docking bay, and the massive red and gold dragon folded his wings carefully to fit through the opening. Ember followed, his silver and blue scales shimmering in the artificial light that poured out from inside the ship. As soon as their tail disappeared into the bay, the doors began to close behind them, sealing them inside the metal vessel. Luna felt a moment of panic flash through her bond with the dragons. She could sense their uncertainty and their instinctive distrust of enclosed spaces, but she sent them calm, reassuring thoughts, and she could feel them begin to relax slightly as they adjusted to their new surroundings. The docking bay was exactly what Luna expected. It was large enough to accommodate 2 dragons comfortably, with reinforced metal floors and walls that had been specially designed to contain powerful energy. There were weapons mounted in the corners, hidden behind panel doors. There was surveillance equipment recording everything that happened in the bay. This was the space of someone who had learned long ago to be careful and prepared for violence. As Luna dismounted from Crimson's back, the first door to the interior of the ship opened, and a figure emerged. Captain Mira was indeed a female, but she was not entirely human. Her skin had a faint purple tint, and her eyes were a brilliant gold that seemed to glow from within. She wore a long coat of dark leather, and there were numerous scars visible on her face and hands. She was tall and lean, with the bearing of someone who had spent decades commanding respect through strength and intelligence. Mira approached Luna carefully, keeping her hands visible and empty of weapons. The 2 females regarded each other across the distance of the docking bay, each trying to read the other, each trying to understand what motivated the being standing before them. Finally, Mira spoke. She told Luna that she knew exactly what was happening, that she knew about the government's plan to harvest elf blood to cure their plague. She told Luna that she had lost her own people to that plague centuries ago, and that she had been working ever since to oppose the government forces that had caused so much suffering. She told Luna that she could help her escape, could hide her from the military hunters, and could provide her with the supplies and knowledge she needed to survive in a hostile universe. Luna listened to every word, and she felt the truth flowing through the cosmic energies around them. This Captain Mira had indeed lost her people. She had indeed fought against the government forces, and she did indeed want tea. The interior of the Windrunner was cramped and narrow, compared to the vast open spaces of planet Keth. Luna had to duck her head to move through the corridors, and she could feel Crimson and Ember's discomfort through their bond as they squeezed their massive bodies through passages that were barely wide enough to accommodate them. Captain Mira led them deeper into the ship. past rows of equipment and storage containers, until they reached a larger chamber in the central section of the vessel. This room was more spacious, clearly designed for cargo or large passengers. The floor was reinforced with thick metal plating, and there were feeding stations and water dispensers positioned along the walls. Mira had clearly prepared this space for the dragons, anticipating their needs with surprising accuracy. Luna felt a small measure of respect beginning to build for the captain. Most beings would have been terrified or at least hostile toward creatures as massive and powerful as Crimson and Ember. But Mira had welcomed them with accommodation and care. Luna settled herself on a metal platform that had been erected in one corner of the chamber, while Crimson and Ember began to explore their new surroundings with cautious curiosity. Mira left to retrieve food and water, returning with servants who carried containers of nutrient paste designed for the dragons and fresh meat that smelled like the creatures that had once roamed across distant planets. As the dragons ate, Luna sat with Mira in a smaller adjacent chamber that served as the captain's private quarters. The room was filled with strange artifacts and displays showing star maps and ancient texts from countless civilizations. Luna recognized some of them, knowledge preserved from cultures that had risen and fallen long before her own people had even developed written language. Mira offered her tea, a hot beverage that had been brewed from plants grown hydroponically somewhere in the lower sections of the ship. Luna accepted the tea and studied the captain more carefully now that they were alone. Mira's movements were fluid and controlled, suggesting years of military or combat training. Her hands bore calluses and old scars. Her eyes held the weight of someone who had witnessed terrible things and had survived by sheer force of will. But there was also kindness in those golden eyes, a gentleness that seemed out of place in someone who was clearly a warrior. Mira began to explain her history. She told Luna about her homeworld, a tropical paradise that had orbited 3 suns and had been home to millions of her kind. She described the beauty of crystal forests and oceans that glowed with bioluminescent creatures. She spoke about her family, her mate, and their children, all of whom had died when the plague swept through her civilization. The government had promised to help her people, but instead they had sent researchers who wanted to study the plague's progression. By the time anyone realized that the government was deliberately preventing a cure in order to observe the disease's effects, it was too late. Luna listened with deep empathy. She understood loss. She had lost her entire civilization to war and persecution. She had watched as her people's great cities fell to ruin, and her knowledge was scattered to the winds. She reached across the small table between them and squeezed Mira's hand gently. It was a gesture that transcended language and culture. It was the simple acknowledgement of one survivor recognizing another. Mira's eyes glistened and she looked away for a moment before composing herself. She told Luna that after her homeworld died, she had spent decades gathering a crew of outcasts and refugees. She had built the Windrunner with salvaged materials and stolen technology. She had dedicated her life to undermining the government's power, to freeing enslaved populations, to distributing cures for the plague that she had managed to synthesize from ancient genetic records. She told Luna that saving Luna was just one part of a much larger mission. But then Mira's expression grew serious and she leaned forward intensely. She told Luna that there was something else, something much more important that she needed to discuss. She told Luna that the government's interest in elf blood was not just about creating a cure. There was something deeper, something that involved the very foundations of space and time itself. She explained that ancient elves possessed a natural affinity for what humans called the void gates, portals that could transport beings instantly across vast distances. The government believed that if they could combine elf genetic material with human technology, they could create new void gates that would give them control over trade routes and military movements across the entire galaxy. Luna felt a chill run down her spine. The void gates, of course. Her people had created those ancient portals centuries ago, and they had hidden the knowledge of how to construct new ones in forgotten temples and lost archives. The elf civilization had deliberately limited the spread of void gate technology to prevent any one power from dominating the galaxy. But if the government could recreate that technology, if they could build new gates and control them with military force, then no civilization would be able to resist their power. Luna asked Mira how she had learned this information. Mira explained that she had an informant inside the government's research division, someone who had risked everything to provide her with classified documents and research data. This informant had warned her that a new directive had been issued. All military vessels were now authorized to capture any elves they encountered alive, by any means necessary. The government was accelerating their timeline. They were preparing to launch a massive campaign to hunt down elves across the galaxy and imprison them in research facilities. Luna felt the connection with Crimson and Ember pulse with alarm. The dragons had sensed her distress through their bond, and they were already moving, their massive forms stirring with anxiety and readiness for combat. Luna sent them calm, soothing thoughts, and she felt them gradually relax, though their alertness remained heightened. Mira stood and walked to a wall panel, pressing her hand against it to activate a holographic display. The three-dimensional image that materialized showed a schematic of a massive space station. It was enormous, a construction of metal and crystal that spanned hundreds of kilometers. Mira explained that this was the government's primary research facility, hidden somewhere in the inner reaches of the galaxy where few beings dared to venture. She told Luna that the facility contained everything the government had learned about elf biology and genetics. But more importantly, she explained that the facility contained records of other elves who had been captured and imprisoned. Luna's heart raced. Other elves. After 300 years of solitude on Keth, after believing herself to be the last of her kind, the possibility that there were other elves alive somewhere in the galaxy was both thrilling and terrifying. She asked Mira how many elves were being held at the facility. Mira told her that according to the informant's reports, there were approximately 50 elf prisoners, all of them kept in stasis in underground vaults. Many of them had been captured decades or even centuries ago. Luna began to formulate a plan in her mind. If there were other elves alive, then they had to be freed. They had to be rescued from their captivity and given the chance to live free lives as she had lived on Keth for so long. But she also understood the danger of such an attempt. The research facility would be heavily guarded. It would be protected by weapons and security, systems that would make the military ship that had attacked them look like a child's toy. She looked at Mira directly and asked the question that had been forming in her mind since the captain had first revealed her secret. What did Mira want from her? Why had she brought Luna here? What was the captain's plan? Mira smiled, and there was a fierce determination in that smile. She told Luna that she wanted to assault the research facility. She told Luna that she believed that with Luna and her dragons, with the combined force of elf magic and dragon power, they might have a chance of infiltrating the station, freeing the prisoners, and escaping before the government's military forces could respond. It was a desperate plan, one with low chances of success, but it was the only plan that Mira had, and she had been waiting for the right moment and the right ally to attempt it. Luna considered this for a long moment. She looked out the window of Mira's quarters at the vast darkness of space beyond. She thought about the freedom that she had enjoyed on Keth, the peace and the beauty of those 3 centuries. She thought about the people that she had left behind on her homeworld, the countless elves who had died during the wars that had driven her civilization to ruin, and she thought about the 50 elves imprisoned in the government facility, living in stasis tubes, their lives stolen from them, their freedom stripped away. There was only one possible answer. Luna reached out and clasped Mira's hand again. She told the captain that she would help her. She told her that together they would free those elves and strike a blow against the government's tyranny. She told her that the dragons would be her allies in this mission, and that together they would show the galaxy what it meant to face the wrath of an ancient elf warrior and her bonded dragons. The Windrunner traveled through space for 3 weeks as Mira and her crew made preparations for the assault on the research facility. During that time, Luna learned the layout and systems of the ship, and she came to understand the beings who served under Mira's command. The crew was diverse, composed of refugees and outcasts from dozens of different civilizations. There was a Callian engineer named Zeth who had 6 arms and spent his days working on the ship's propulsion systems. There was a human pilot named Marcus who had defected from the military and now served Mira with fierce loyalty. There was a medic named Suki, a small reptilian being whose scaled skin shifted between green and brown depending on her emotional state. Luna found herself growing fond of these beings. They treated her with respect and kindness, and they showed no fear of Crimson and Ember, accepting the dragons as natural members of the crew. During the long hours when the ship traveled through deep space, Luna would sit in the cargo chamber with the dragons and tell them stories of her people's history. She told them about the great cities that had once gleamed beneath the light of crystal suns. She told them about the libraries that had contained all the knowledge of the elf civilization. She told them about the wars that had torn everything apart and scattered her people to the far corners of the galaxy. Crimson and Ember listened with the patient attention that only creatures who had lived for thousands of years could muster. Through their bond, they shared their own memories with Luna. She experienced the ancient times when the dragons had lived as wild creatures in the mountains of a world long dead. She felt the joy of the moment when she had first bonded with each of them, centuries ago. She remembered the struggles they had faced together, the dangers they had overcome, the triumphs they had celebrated. But as the journey continued, Luna also began to experience doubts and fears. She was about to embark on a mission that would almost certainly result in massive destruction. There would be death, not just among the government's forces, but potentially among her new friends and allies as well. She found herself wrestling with the moral weight of these decisions. Was it right to risk so many lives to save 50 elves? Was it right to become a weapon of destruction, even in the service of a just cause? One night, as Luna sat alone in Mira's quarters, the captain came to her and found her staring out the window at the distant stars. Mira sat beside her silently for a long time before speaking. She told Luna that she understood the burden of command, the terrible weight of making decisions that would affect the lives of others. She told Luna that she had struggled with the same questions for decades, ever since she had first decided to fight against the government. Mira explained that there was a philosophy among the refugees and outcasts, a belief that sometimes the only way to fight tyranny was to use force and violence. But she also acknowledged that this philosophy had a cost. Every life taken in the pursuit of freedom was a tragedy, even if it served a greater good. The key was to minimize that cost, to be precise and strategic, to avoid unnecessary suffering whenever possible. Luna asked Mira if she had any doubts about their mission. Mira answered honestly. She told Luna that she had doubts every single day, but she had learned that doubts were not the same as uncertainty. She knew in her heart that the government's actions were wrong. She knew that fighting back was necessary, and she knew that Luna's arrival had given her something she had not had before. She had given her hope that this mission could actually succeed. Over the following days, Mira and Luna worked closely together to develop the tactical plan for infiltrating the research facility. They studied the schematic images provided by Mira's informant. They identified weak points in the security systems. They planned the timing and coordination of their assault. Crimson and Ember were included in all of these planning sessions. The dragons, with their thousands of years of tactical experience, provided insights that proved invaluable. They suggested approaches and strategies that Luna would not have thought of on her own. The dragon's intelligence had always been a source of wonder to Luna. While they could not speak in words as humans and elves did, they could communicate complex ideas and strategies through the bond they shared. They could visualize scenarios and imagine outcomes. They could understand the principles of military tactics and the flow of battle in ways that were sophisticated and nuanced. Over the centuries, Luna had come to rely on their wisdom and their perspective. One afternoon, Mira received a coded message from her informant inside the government facility. The message contained critical new information. The government was planning to move several of the elf prisoners to another location within the month. Once they were moved, it would be much more difficult to rescue them. The window of opportunity was closing. They had to act within the next 2 weeks or they would lose their chance to save those elves. The news created a new urgency within the crew of the Windrunner. The preparation timeline was compressed. They had to move faster, make decisions more quickly, accept more risk. Mira called a meeting of her senior officers in the main command chamber. She explained the situation and revealed the plan to rescue the imprisoned elves. The reaction was mixed. Some of the officers voiced support for the mission. Marcus, the pilot, told Luna that he had joined Mira's crew specifically because he wanted to fight against government injustice. He said that rescuing the elves was exactly the kind of operation he had signed up for. But others had concerns. Zeth, the engineer, worried that the ship's engines might not be able to withstand the electromagnetic weapons that would be used to protect the facility. Suki, the medic, worried about how they would care for the rescued elves, many of whom had been in stasis for decades and might have serious medical complications. Luna listened to all of these concerns, and she understood them. But she also felt something else beginning to stir within her. It was the warrior spirit of her people, the ancient heritage of courage and determination that had been part of elf culture for thousands of years. It was the understanding that sometimes the only way forward was through sacrifice and struggle. It was the knowledge that freedom, when it was finally achieved, was worth any price. Luna stood and addressed the assembled officers. She told them that she understood their concerns, and she honored their caution. But she also told them that she had lived for 1,000 years, and that in all that time she had rarely encountered a chance to make a meaningful difference in the fate of others. She told them that rescuing those 50 elves was not just about saving lives, though that alone would be worthwhile. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen, about showing the galaxy that tyranny could be challenged and defeated, about giving hope to all the oppressed and enslaved beings that existed under the government's rule. She told them that she understood the risks. She told them that some of them might not survive the mission, but she also told them that they had a chance to be part of something truly significant. They had a chance to change history. And she told them that if they were willing to accept those risks, then she would fight by their side, and her dragons would fight beside her, and together they would accomplish something that the government believed was impossible. The officers listened to her words, and Luna could see the shift in their expressions. She could see determination replacing doubt. She could see courage beginning to kindle in their eyes. When she finished speaking, Marcus was the first to stand and voice his support. He was followed by Suki and then Zeth and then the others. By the end of the meeting, every officer present had committed themselves to the mission. Mira watched this happen with a strange expression on her face. After the officers had departed, she pulled Luna aside and told her something that Luna had not expected to hear. She told Luna that she had seen this kind of inspiration only a few times in her life. She told Luna that she was a natural leader, that beings responded to her words and her presence in ways that were rare and remarkable. She told Luna that whatever happened on their mission, Luna had already succeeded in uniting Mira's crew in a way that had seemed impossible just hours before. Luna did not know how to respond to such praise. She had never thought of herself as a leader. She had always been alone, isolated on distant worlds, forming bonds with only her dragons. But now she understood that the ancient knowledge of her people included not just magic and mystical power, but also the ability to inspire others and to guide them toward noble purposes. That night, Luna returned to the cargo chamber and stood between Crimson and Ember. She placed her hands on their scaled heads and closed her eyes. Through their bond, she felt their strength and their readiness. She felt their confidence in her and their commitment to the coming battle. And she felt something else as well. She felt the presence of all the other elves who had come before her, the great warriors and leaders of her civilization who had sacrificed everything to protect their kind. She felt their legacy flowing through her, empowering her, preparing her for the challenge that lay ahead. The research facility appeared on the view screen like a massive dark spider, suspended in the void of space. It was exactly as the schematics had shown it, but seeing it in person was far more intimidating than any diagram could have conveyed. The station was a sprawling complex of interconnected modules and structures, bristling with weapons emplacements and sensor arrays. Around it orbited a defensive perimeter of automated drone fighters, each one capable of unleashing devastating firepower at the slightest provocation. Luna stood on the bridge of the Windrunner beside Mira and watched as the captain consulted with her officers. Tension hung heavy in the air. The moment they had been planning for was finally upon them. Once they began their assault, there would be no turning back. The government would know that Mira was alive and active, and they would mobilize all their forces to hunt her down. Luna's presence at the facility would also be revealed, and she would become a target for every military vessel in the sector. Mira turned to Luna and gave the signal they had agreed upon. Luna nodded and made her way to the docking bay where Crimson and Ember waited. The massive dragons had been fitted with specialized harnesses designed to distribute the weight of weapons and ammunition. Their scales had been treated with a special coating that would help them reflect certain types of laser fire. The dragons understood the purpose of these modifications, and they accepted them without resistance. Luna mounted Crimson's back and felt the familiar surge of power that came with their bond. Ember took his position beside them, ready for the assault. Through the open docking bay door, Luna could see the research facility hanging in space. She could feel the fear and uncertainty radiating from the facility's defenders as they detected the Windrunners' approach. They had not expected an attack. They had believed themselves safe and secure in their hidden location. Mira's voice crackled through the communication system. She told Luna that it was time. The assault would begin immediately. The Windrunner would engage the defensive drones while Luna and the Dragons would launch toward the facility's main docking port. Their target was the primary generator station located 3 levels below the surface. If they could destroy it, the facility's shields would fail, and Mira's ship could move into a position to begin extracting the imprisoned elves. Luna leaned forward and whispered a final command to Crimson through their bond. The dragon beat his massive wings powerfully, launching into the void of space. Ember followed immediately, his silver scales gleaming against the darkness. Behind them, Luna heard the roar of weapons fire as the Windrunner began its assault on the facility's external defenses. The dragons flew fast and low, using the debris of the facility's own structure as cover to avoid the initial salvo of laser fire that erupted from the station's defense cannons. Luna felt her heart racing, felt the adrenaline flooding through her veins. This was what she had been born for, what her ancient instincts had been honed to accomplish. This was war, and she was a warrior. A wave of defensive drones intercepted them before they could reach the docking port. The small fighters were fast and agile, but they lacked the raw power and tactical awareness of the dragons. Crimson twisted in mid-flight and released a torrent of red flame that engulfed 3 of the drones, burning through their armor like paper. Ember's blue fire was more focused and precise, targeting the weapon systems of the remaining drones and rendering them useless. The docking port was now within reach. Luna could see the opening in the facility's outer hull, the passage that would lead them inside. She guided Crimson toward it, and the dragon folded his wings carefully as they approached. For just a moment, Luna wondered if the dragon would fit through the opening. The passageway seemed impossibly narrow compared to Crimson's massive bulk, but the dragon's body was more flexible and resilient than its size suggested. Crimson squeezed through the opening with a scraping of metal against scales, and Ember followed right behind. The interior of the facility was a maze of corridors and chambers. Luna had memorized the route to the generator station from the schematic information that Mira had provided. She guided Crimson through the passages, moving as quickly as she dared while remaining aware of the dangers that might be waiting around every corner. She could hear the sound of alarm bells ringing throughout the facility. She could feel the tremor of explosions reverberating through the metal walls as the Windrunner's weapons continued their bombardment from outside. They encountered their first resistance in a large chamber that had been set up as a defensive position. Soldiers in combat armor lined the walls, their weapons raised and ready to fire. The chamber was small and confined, designed to be difficult for a large target to navigate. But Luna had expected something like this. She had anticipated that the facility would have contingency plans for intruders. Without waiting for the soldiers to open fire, Crimson released a wave of red flame that swept through the chamber like an inferno. The soldiers screamed and fell, their armor no match for the intense heat of dragonfire. Luna felt a twinge of regret for their deaths, but she pushed the feeling aside. These soldiers had chosen to work for the government. They had chosen to be part of the system that imprisoned innocent elves. They were complicit in crimes of terrible magnitude. Ember followed Crimson through the chamber, and the blue dragon's flames consumed any remaining resistance. They pressed onward, deeper into the facility. Luna could feel the tremors becoming more intense as the Windrunner's assault continued outside. Time was running out. They had to reach the generator station soon, or the military reinforcements would arrive before they could complete their mission. The generator station was exactly as Luna had imagined it would be. It was a vast chamber filled with enormous machinery and power conduits that hummed with energy. The control console was elevated on a platform at the center of the chamber. 3 technicians worked frantically at the console, trying to reroute power through backup systems and stabilize the facility's shields. They looked up in absolute terror as Crimson emerged from the doorway, his massive head nearly touching the ceiling of the chamber. Luna did not hesitate. She raised her hand and called upon the ancient magic of her people. Energy crackled from her fingertips, forming a brilliant wave of power that struck the control console and destroyed it completely. The machinery around her began to overload, their power systems destabilized by her magical attack. Red warning lights began to flash throughout the chamber. An automated voice announced that the facility's shields had failed and that emergency lockdown procedures were being initiated. They had done it. The first part of their mission was complete. Now they had to escape and reach the stasis chamber where the imprisoned elves were being held. Luna guided Crimson back through the corridors they had come from, moving even faster now that the alarm had been fully raised. She could hear the sound of soldiers running through the passages, the clang of metal doors slamming shut, the roar of weapons fire echoing through the facility. But Mira's forces were also making their move outside. The Windrunner had moved into position near the facility's main docking port, and a shuttle was launching from the ship. The shuttle would pick them up and transport them to the stasis chamber. The plan was to extract all 50 imprisoned elves and get them to safety before the government's military forces could respond. Luna and the dragons made it to the extraction point just as the shuttle was landing. Mira was there to meet them, along with Marcus and a small team of heavily armed soldiers. Mira took one look at Luna and smiled despite the chaos and danger surrounding them. She told Luna that her plan was working. The facility's defenses were failing. Their reinforcements had not yet arrived. They had a narrow window of opportunity, and they had to move immediately. The group moved through the facility toward the stasis chamber. Mira's informant had provided them with access codes and security clearances that allowed them to bypass many of the locked doors. They descended deeper and deeper into the bowels of the station, leaving the dragons behind because the passages were too narrow to accommodate them. Luna felt the familiar ache of separation from Crimson and Ember, but she trusted them to wait safely in the extraction chamber. The stasis chamber was like stepping into a tomb. Rows upon rows of transparent containers lined the chamber walls, and inside each container was a figure suspended in stasis. Luna felt her breath catch in her throat as she looked at them. These were her people, elves just like herself, frozen in time and imprisoned in this place. Some of them had been here for decades, some had been here for centuries. Their faces were peaceful, but Luna could sense the underlying torment and suffering even in their frozen states. Mira and her team began to access the stasis controls. The chief technician, a small mammalian being named Kev, worked frantically at the main console, entering the codes that would deactivate all the stasis fields simultaneously. One by one, the glowing containers began to dim. One by one, the imprisoned elves began to wake from their long sleep. The extraction chamber erupted into chaos as Luna and the group of rescued elves arrived with Mira and her soldiers. Military transports had indeed docked at the facility, and soldiers were now advancing through the corridors toward their position. Luna could hear the sound of boots and armor echoing through the metal passages. She could hear the roar of weapons fire as Mira's rear guard engaged the advancing military forces. Crimson and Ember rushed toward Luna the moment she entered the chamber, their massive bodies expressing relief and joy at her safe return. Through their bond, Luna felt their eagerness to fight, their readiness to protect her and the rescued elves. Luna quickly assessed the situation. The chamber was still crowded with the rescued elves, many of them still recovering from their long stasis sleep. The shuttle had returned from the Windrunner and was preparing to make its final departure. But there was not enough time to evacuate everyone before the military soldiers arrived. Luna made a decision. She told Mira to take the shuttle with as many elves as possible and return to the Windrunner. She told the captain that she and the dragons would hold off the military forces and provide a barrier that would allow the others to escape. Mira immediately objected, telling Luna that it was suicide to stand against the military forces with only 2 dragons. But Luna was already moving, already guiding Crimson and Ember toward the chamber entrance where the soldiers would arrive. The first contingent of military soldiers appeared in the doorway, their weapons raised and ready to fire. They were hardened warriors, trained and disciplined, but they had never faced anything like what Crimson and Ember represented. The moment the dragons burst forward, the soldiers opened fire, their laser weapons cutting through the air with brilliant flashes of red light. But the dragons' scales reflected much of the laser fire, and their natural magical defenses dispersed the rest. Crimson released a torrent of red flame that filled the entire corridor, and the soldiers were engulfed in inferno. More soldiers poured through the doorway behind the first contingent, stepping over the bodies of their fallen comrades. Luna realized that this bottleneck would not hold forever. She needed a different strategy. She reached out with her ancient elf magic and seized control of the metal ceiling above the corridor. The ceiling groaned and buckled, collapsing down onto the approaching soldiers and sealing the passage. Debris rained down, blocking the doorway completely. But Luna knew that this barrier would not last long. The military forces would have cutting equipment and explosives. They would dig through the rubble in minutes. Luna gestured to the shuttle pilot who was watching the scene unfold from inside the aircraft. She told him to take off immediately and return to the Windrunner. The pilot hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. The shuttle doors began to close and the aircraft lifted off the ground, rising toward the docking port that would take them to freedom. Luna felt a surge of satisfaction as the shuttle departed with the rescued elves and Mira and most of her soldiers. They had accomplished the primary objective. Even if Luna and the dragons did not make it out of this facility alive, the rescued elves would be safe. That knowledge gave Luna strength and peace. She turned her attention back to the sealed corridor. She could hear the sound of cutting tools and explosives being deployed on the other side of the rubble. The military forces were working quickly to break through. Luna placed her hands on Crimson's neck and spoke to the dragon through their bond. She told him what she was planning. She told him that they would need to make a final stand in this chamber. She told him that she was ready to fight to the end if that was what survival required. Crimson and Ember surrounded Luna, their massive bodies forming a protective barrier. The rubble began to shift and move as the military forces worked to clear the passage. Luna could feel the approach of dozens of soldiers, all armed and prepared for combat. She could feel the determination in their minds and hearts. They had orders to capture or kill the elf woman and her dragons. They were going to try to do exactly that. But then something unexpected happened. The facility's emergency alarm system activated at full volume, and a computerized voice announced that all compartment seals had been breached. The facility was suffering from critical structural damage. Decompression was occurring throughout multiple sections. Emergency evacuation procedures were being initiated for all remaining personnel. Luna realized what had happened. Mira, in her final act before departing the facility, had deliberately initiated a cascade failure in the facility's structural integrity systems. The captain had ensured that the rescue would not be followed by a recapture. She had made it clear that anyone who tried to recapture the rescued elves would have to do so while dealing with a dying facility that was collapsing around them. The military forces on the other side of the rubble began to panic. Luna could hear them shouting orders and retreating. The threat of decompression was forcing them to abandon their pursuit and focus on saving themselves. Luna guided Crimson and Ember toward the docking port, following the path that the shuttle had taken. They made it to the port just as the facility around them began to disintegrate. Metal groaned and buckled. Explosions erupted from ruptured power conduits. The vacuum of space was beginning to rush into the facility, and Luna could feel the intense cold beginning to creep along her skin. They launched themselves into the void just moments before the docking port sealed behind them, locking the dragons outside the dying station. The Windrunner was waiting for them, its docking bay doors already open and ready to receive them. Crimson and Ember flew toward the ship with desperate speed, pushing themselves to the limit of their power. Luna clung to Crimson's neck, breathing hard, her heart pounding with the exhilaration of survival. They crashed through the docking bay doors, and the massive dragon's wings finally came to rest as the bay pressurized and filled with breathable air. Luna slid down from Crimson's back and collapsed onto the metal floor of the docking bay, her legs too weak to support her. Within moments, Mira and Marcus and the other crew members rushed into the bay. Mira dropped to her knees beside Luna and helped her to sit up. She asked if Luna was injured, if she needed medical attention. Luna managed to shake her head and tell the captain that she was alive, and that was all that mattered. Mira told Luna that the rescued elves were being cared for in the main chamber of the ship. Many of them were beginning to recover from their stasis sleep. Some of them were asking for her, wanting to meet the elf woman who had orchestrated their rescue. Mira also told Luna that the Windrunner was now under military pursuit. The government forces would be hunting them across the galaxy, using all their resources to track down the ship and capture or destroy it. Luna nodded and accepted this knowledge. She knew that this rescue mission would have consequences. She knew that the government would view it as an act of rebellion that could not go unpunished, but she also knew that what they had accomplished was too important to regret. They had freed 50 enslaved elves. They had struck a blow against tyranny and oppression. They had shown the galaxy that resistance against government power was possible. Over the following hours, the Windrunner jumped to hyperspace and fled deeper into the outer regions of the galaxy. Luna finally had the chance to meet the rescued elves properly. She moved among them, speaking with them individually, learning their names and their stories. She found that some of them remembered the elf civilization before it fell. Some of them had been alive for thousands of years. They shared memories of their ancient homeworld and their great cities and their lost culture. An elderly elf female named Serena approached Luna and grasped her hands firmly. Serena told Luna that she had been imprisoned for nearly 500 years. She had believed that her entire species had been exterminated, that she was the last of her kind and would die in isolation. But now she had met Luna, and she had met 49 other elves, and she understood that their people still existed. Serena told Luna that she represented hope for their future, and she asked Luna what they should do now that they had been given this second chance at freedom. Luna considered this question carefully. She told Serena and all the other rescued elves that she did not have all the answers. She told them that they had been given a precious gift of freedom, and now they would have to decide what to do with that freedom. Some of them might want to settle on peaceful worlds and live quiet lives away from danger and conflict. Some of them might want to join the resistance against the government and fight for the liberation of all enslaved beings. And some of them might want to work toward rebuilding elf civilization and reclaiming their place in the galaxy. She told them that whatever they chose, they would face challenges and dangers. The government would continue to hunt them. There would be hardship and struggle ahead, but they would face these challenges as free beings, making their own choices and determining their own fates. They would no longer be prisoners and subjects. They would be masters of their own destinies,